are going live. If you're seeing us, say something.
Hello.
And we are super excited to be talking to everybody today. So let me go ahead and make sure that everything is connected. As you know, it's not just going on Crowdcast, our platform of choice, but it is also going live on Facebook. And I see you there on Facebook and on YouTube Live. And I see it on YouTube Live and on Periscope. And so let me just make sure that we've got this rolling. Periscope's always the one that gives me a little bit of trouble, but I see it and we are live. Okay. Rock and roll. Okay, everybody, welcome to Association Chat. This is your weekly online discussion for the association community where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire with topics of the day, welcoming thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the community. I'm your host, Kiki L'Italien, and I want to give a shout out before we get started. First, good job, ASAE. I attended your meeting this morning on GDPR, Understand and Adapt to New Data Privacy Regulation. It was packed. The meeting was sold out, and so many smart people were in the room. I was in heaven. It was absolute pure gold. So good job. If you guys missed it, you can go back to a previous association chat where I interviewed David DiLorenzo, the brilliant people from the Trust Bridge, and we talked about all things GDPR. So just a few episodes ago, it was about a month ago, you can go back and hear that, listen to that. And then as always, I want to give a big thanks and shout out to our wonderful sponsor, Fontiva, the AMS for Innovation, for their ongoing support of Association Chat and the community here. Check out Fontiva.com to find out about Fontiva for associations, Fontiva for events, Fontiva for government, and more. You can check them out at Fontiva.com. Or you can click on, if you're in Crowdcast, you can click on the green call to action button that says visit our sponsor, Fontiva. And yes, thank you, Elizabeth. And it will take you there. All right. So are we ready for the show? Episode is titled after the white paper, Steal Like a Fundraiser, Innovations and Cause-Oriented Fundraising for Associations. And if you're curious at all, if you're here because you're like, steal like a fundraiser, that's what I need to do, then you're in luck, because here to talk with us today are special guests, Soani Laliga. She's the Director of Communications at Taxpayers for Common Sense, and Elizabeth Weaver-Engel, CEO and Chief Strategist at Spark Consulting. Welcome, Soani and Elizabeth. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I am so excited that you're here because, the thing is that in reading the white paper, I saw that there was a lot of interesting little facts and details that I had never really considered. That's one area of associations that I haven't really jumped into a whole lot. But fundraising is an area that I think is fascinating because that's where those people somehow are able to bring in so much money, the ability to have those conversations, the ability to be successful. And some of the most charismatic people I've ever met have been people who have success, who are fundraisers or have been fundraisers and have successfully figured out how to build relationships and take your money at the same time. So I was very curious to talk with you because I wanted to dig into that a little bit more. I wanted to find out what some of those secrets were that you uncovered. So give me a little bit of background. Elizabeth, dear friend, you've been on Association Chat several times and talking usually about a white paper that you've been a part of. And so they've covered all kinds of things, lean startup methodology. What was it before? I can't even keep up.
Member engagement.
Member engagement. There's one Peggy. Why don't you give me a little bit of background about how all of this came about, how this white paper came about?
Sure. So for the white papers generally, I keep a running list of topics that I think I might be interested in digging into at some point. And then I kind of wait for the right time, the right person to work with to show up. Something will trigger, this is the time to take on this topic. So how did I get this whole idea of lessons from fundraising for association execs? Okay, so I guess it was in 2007, 2008. I was working for a consulting firm in the DC area where their client base was more fundraising and cause oriented organizations. They brought me on because they were thinking about starting an association practice, and in the end decided not to do that. And I went back into the association world, and that was that. But while I was there, we were kind of doing that information sharing of two sides of the nonprofit world. We know fundraising organizations, what can we tell you about them? I know associations, what can I tell you about them? And I remember, they looked at associations and were just astonished at how willing we all are as association execs to share information with each other. Because in the association world, if you're the Emergency Nurses Association, why wouldn't you share information with the Maryland Association of CPAs? You are definitely not competing for the same members. You're not competing for the same sponsors. Like there's no overlap in those audiences at all. So if you learn something that works, of course you'll share it with your friends at the CPA organization, and maybe it'll work for them too. In the fundraising world, it's a little different because the perception, and it's probably an accurate perception, is that there's a pie of how much money people who give are going to give each year. And if I find something as a fundraiser that's working and I tell you, then you will start doing it and your slice of the pie will get bigger and my slice of the pie will get smaller. And then I am not happy. And so, that whole it's kind of a different mindset and the way of looking at working with colleagues. So I'm there and I'm starting to learn about all the great things that fundraisers do to raise money, all the really clever, interesting, innovative kinds of things they do. And what started striking me is that donors are not that different than members. In fact, I would say donors are more like members than customers are like members. And so, because of the type and duration of relationship you're trying to build, and the whole mission oriented organization, and tie to mission, all that kind of thing. And I thought, well, let me kind of look around and see if there are some good things that fundraisers do that maybe associations should think about doing. And the answer was yes. And at the time, this was long before I had launched Spark, long before I was doing white papers, any of that stuff. And I just kind of thought, I'm just kind of stick that in the back of my mind because there's some good stuff here that I feel like someday might be useful. I don't know how, I don't know where, I don't know when, but I would like to revisit this idea at some point in the future. And so then, this past fall became the right time to do that.
So, okay. And so how did Soany get involved? Where did that come in?
Is that for me?
Yes.
So I think the answer to everything here is pretty much relationships. If you ask me what fundraising is about, I will tell you it's all about relationships. And Elizabeth and I met once at a conference some 10 years ago.
At least.
Longer than that. Longer than that. And I stayed in touch because when you're in the nonprofit world, you stay in touch whether or not somebody can do something for you. And we just stayed in touch. I happen to enjoy her company and we, have a lot of things in common and share the same zany sense of humor. So that's very helpful. But really what it came down to is I have worked in nonprofit for the last 20 some years. I have set up campaigns from start to finish. And so when she was talking to me about some of the issues in the association world, I was kind of like, really? How is that not standard? And so we sort of started to talk about that. And when she invited me to write about it, I never turned down the opportunity to hold forth. So there we go.
Well, okay. So let's talk about some of the things you found. You talked about 3 big points in the paper. And so I would love for you to jump into the first one and maybe share a little bit about that key point and some of the findings, some of the maybe case studies that came around to support it.
Yeah, it's the whole idea of so the first point we raised is the whole idea of treating people, members in particular, equitably rather than equally. And this was actually one of the big things that jumped out at me when I was working for this this fundraising consulting firm, is that fundraising organizations deal with donors at all levels. So you might have somebody who gives you 10 or 15 or 25 bucks once, because they're in a sports arena and there's a, text to give campaign and they give you $10 and whatever. But then you also have people who are major donors who give you 5 and 6 figure gifts every year, people who are
Right.
legacy donors, and so they're dealing with this really wide range of people who contribute, but they all do contribute. And one of the things that had really jumped out at me is fundraisers understand that all of those contributions matter,
Mhm.
but they don't matter equally. And so you need to make sure that that person who did do that $10 text to give contribution is thanked and feels recognized and feels good about the contribution that she made, and like she is contributing to trying to solve a problem or address an issue that's important to her. But you don't go to the same lengths for her as you do for somebody who gives you $10,000 or $100,000 or $1,000,000. And so, I one of the things that had occurred to me about that is the dollar figure range that we're talking about is not as wide,
Mhm.
but different members are differently valuable to the association, to membership associations, and we don't necessarily always treat them that way. We want to treat everybody the same. You
Mhm.
buy your membership, you get the same benefits. We're all equal, and all that kind of thing. And that's not necessarily appropriate. And Sohini, I remember this was one of the things where you're like, really?
Mhm.
That's not a
Yeah,
thing that associations do?
nothing could be further from the truth in the nonprofit world. For instance, we were chatting in the green room just before we started about how I'd let a membership in an association lapse. I never heard back from them. I think I got one reminder saying
Yeah.
you're due, and I never heard back. I'm here to tell you that if somebody does not give in the nonprofit world, you reach out to them more than once, whether it's a $10 donor or it's a $200 donor. You reach out to them to find out, are they there? What happened? What changed? Is there a
Yeah.
reason why they're not giving today? Is there maybe a reason that should we come to them later on? Does no just mean not right now? All of those things are pieces of data that help you figure out why your fundraising is working or not working. And to Elizabeth's point about how you appropriately thank every member.
Mm.
Yeah, the person who gives $10, you thank them. The person who gives you $10,000 gets a very different set of outreach.
Oh,
And there's a
yes.
great deal. It seems so that's a widespread 10 to 10,000. Fine, break it down. Break it down to something smaller. The person who gives $300 a year or something like that, something that's a little bit bigger, but maybe not that much bigger than the next level, but give them a reason to give you what they give
More.
you. And the
Right.
other thing that I want to say at the beginning of this conversation, Kiki, you said it's what is it? The expression that you used was take your money. I'm not taking their money. I'm giving them an opportunity to be some part of something bigger.
Oh, I love that. I love
I have
that.
never ever thought of it as, ooh, give me your money. That's really not how you should think about fundraising. And it's
Mhm.
not how fundraisers typically think about it. I'm sure that's how some people think about it. And I'm sure that's how it feels when you get the 700th, whatever,
Request. Yeah.
request, which by the way goes to how well you know your audience and how much homework you've done in terms of how to reach them, where to reach them, when to reach them. Because it's not just a question of fish where the fish are, it's fish how the fish want to be fished,
Yeah.
which is a
Yeah.
terrible use of words, but there you go. The thing is, you should know how to reach the people you are going for. You should know how to reach the people who have already said they are interested in knowing more about your organization. They want to be part of your cause. They want to be part of your association. They like what they get from the meetings. if you at that point do not know the difference then between somebody who's just done that once and somebody who's done that 7 times, that speaks to a lack of research that you should fix.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
And it's, do you want to talk about, is this a good time to bring up a couple of the case studies, which I think demonstrate it really, really well?
Yeah, I think we want to, we want to bring up Woolly Mammoth.
Yes, that's kind of where I was going there.
They're our case study for dealing with major donors. And this idea of your $10 donor, your $100 donor, your $1,000 donor, your $10,000 are all valuable, but they're not equally valuable. And so, I disclosure, I am a donor to Woolly Mammoth Theater Company, have been for a number of years. And so, I intentionally reached out to them to be one of our case studies because I know they do a good job of this. And so, Sohini, I think I know what you wanted to bring up, so I'm going to toss it to you to bring it up.
Sure. Oh, it's just, there are a couple of things. So for instance, the person who comes once a year or buys just like the one ticket, they get a certain level of outreach. But the person who has been giving for a long time, the person who is, or the person who wants not what is normal, but was wondering if they can get a little bit more because what you have to offer doesn't fit their life. You have young parents, for instance, who are not going to go at 2:00 in the afternoon because that's nap time for them as well as the kid. Or you have people who are gonna, you have people with mobility issues for whom parking is important, or there are people who take the metro and for them parking is a non-issue. You have to be able to reach out to all of these people. You have to know who these people are. And that was the thing that really struck me when we talked to their development director. She knows all her major donors because that's what it comes down to. It's knowing the people, it's having those relationships, it's doing your research, it's knowing who this person is who's been giving for a long, long time, quietly, never opens their mail, but will reliably come in at that time of year because that's when they give. You have to be willing for them. You have to be willing to be open to when they're going to come to you. And if they say to you, I love this package, but this is not working for me, work with them. Figure out what it is that works for them, because ultimately you want them in the seats in the theater. You want them to feel like they can come back to you, and you want them to be a long-term relationship.
So, how this translates in a membership environment is, we do still have a tendency to operate in this sort of, you can have the car in any color you want it as long as it's black kind of world. And it's like, well, this is what membership costs and this is what you get. It's the same for everyone. And one of the things that we all know, but we don't necessarily do a good job of doing anything useful with this information, is you might have a list of 10 member benefits. Any given member is probably there for 2 or maybe 3 of them. You need to know what those 2 or 3 benefits are for a couple of reasons, not least of which is you don't want to hammer the other 7, because then I'm making the calculation as the member, wait a second, I'm paying you however many dollars per year I'm paying you, and these are the 2 things that I like. I'm paying for these 8 things I use. Hang on. How much do I really like those 2 things? Can I get them some other way other than paying you my membership dollars? Also, you want to make sure that you are promoting the benefits that that person wants to. So if you know about me that I love webinars, right? Every time you give a webinar, I'm in, I register, I go, I love online learning, right?
Right.
You're having another webinar. Make sure I know about it, right? If I never attend webinars, don't probably bother to give me any kind of special notification that this is going to be happening, right? Maybe I'm the member who loves to come to the conference. Okay, then you need to make sure I know about the conference. And so that level of knowing your members lets you do, even though, okay, realistically, you're still going to be doing all the stuff that, those 8 things that I don't, as a particular individual member, happen to value. You're still going to do those things. But this lets the association show the member, hey, we know you. We know who you are. We know what you like. We know what you're
Yeah.
using. You know, you're not just some anonymous number to us. The second place that this expresses itself is possibly the turn of phrase that I am proudest of in this entire white paper, is the hypothetical example that we give related to treating members equitably, not equally, which is, you've got one member who comes in, your conference was in Seattle. He lives in Seattle. He registers, for the conference with where it's the conference plus membership special package, last day of early bird. He goes to your conference, blah, blah, blah. A year later, he lapses because your
Mm-hmm.
conference is now in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
You can probably surmise that he joined because he wanted to go to your conference to get the member rate because it was local, right? And of course, you want to pursue him and you want to verify that information if you can. Of course, you want to invite him to rejoin. But you look at that and say, okay, well, maybe he really just he wanted to come to the conference, and like the next time it's in Seattle, he'll probably come back. Or if he moves, he might come back. And so that member gets one level of effort. Then you've got a completely different kind of member, somebody who has been a long-term member, who's been a volunteer, who has maybe earned your certification, who has written for your magazine or presented for some of your events or things like that. And she doesn't renew.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you don't just, with her, you don't have to go, well, this stuff happens, throw her back into your reacquisition campaign. No, 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 no. That's like that first
That's a
guy.
red flag.
That is a huge red flag.
That's
Yeah,
a
right.
huge red flag.
Right. So the turn of phrase that I was proud of is the first guy took your association out for coffee and decided that you weren't a match. The second member has served your association divorce papers, and you really should find out why she wants to divorce you
Yeah.
after this longer term, much more involved relationship. Well, a lot of times we don't do that. We're just like,
I know.
he left, she left, they left. It's churn and membership, membership
Yeah.
lapsing is a fact of life.
But it's not.
It's
And
not.
that's the thing. And, it's so crazy because, we talk so much about building relationships, and that's so, so important. And so it seems crazy to me that you can be so invested in getting them the first time. And then after you've gone through all the struggle and all the turmoil of bringing that member on or getting that fundraiser, that somehow the member just sort of disappears and never to be seen or heard from again. And what happened? Who knows? I do think that that's a little crazy. It's interesting because, I'm overgeneralizing here, but I think about like the fundraisers, and I know before the show we were talking a little bit about this. The fundraisers I've met have been incredibly charismatic and personable. Not, when you think about somebody who, I'm not going to say is able to get the money, but somebody who is providing an opportunity to connect and build and let somebody like, become a part of something that they care about in a financial way sometimes. Um, they were seemingly very genuine, and I was actually standing next to a movie star when I met a fundraiser for the American Red Cross national headquarters when I worked there. And I was standing next to a real movie star. And I swear, and Bonnie McIlvaine Hunter, she spoke to her, then she spoke to me the same way. It was just exactly the same. And I was staff, and this was a movie star guest, right? An ambassador. And it was just like the same way, just very genuine, she gave attention. I'm sure that she would have spent more attention with this other person, a little bit longer if she needed to. But she was genuine. She was present. She was there. She was invested. I think that that's really interesting to notice, because is that equitable, not equal? You know, I appreciated that it was equitable. I appreciated that she was genuine with me. I totally understood if she spent more time with somebody else that, may have donated more or spent more of their time and had greater status or something.
Well, that's
So,
because smart fundraisers understand that you have to be willing to receive people wherever and however they are willing to give to you,
yeah,
which means you could be a future you could be a future major donor. And
right.
I think that's one of the things that came up in our research is, and I don't know if you want to jump right into that, but everybody wants younger donors
Oh,
because
let's talk
because
about that. Yes,
well,
yes,
well,
yes.
well, first, before we even get into that, I just want to back up just a minute. In fundraising, it's not one and done. It's a long-term thing. It's one of the reasons why I don't know as much as the two of you do about the association world, obviously, but in the fundraising in the nonprofit world, communications and development work hand in hand. And really, communications may seem like this outward-facing, external face of an organization, but you're there to support the fundraising efforts. And you work together to find reasons to be in touch with people because it's not just the first time they come in. It's how are you going to be of value to them? What are you going to say to them the next time? Because you want to always be in touch with people. You want to be on their radar. You want to stay in communication with them because that's how you find out whether they're about to go off they're about to stop giving or not.
Right.
And if they're about to stop, you can find out why and you can maybe fix it because fundraising relationships are not short term, they are always long term. Which is why, by the way, you treat the $10 donor with as much respect as you do the $100 donor, because the $10 donor today is tomorrow's $100 donor. And this brings me to people who can't give at all, or they can't give as much. They give the gift of time.
Right.
They give the gift of time, they give the gift of time and they give the gift of volunteering and they give the gift of commitment. And a smart fundraiser values that and respects that as much. And perhaps it's because I've learned this from a variety of places, but I'm not surprised that that person stood next to a movie star and then talked to you with the same attention and focus. That is what you should do. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter who you're talking to. The non-movie star might be the one who has more money than the movie star.
Yeah, that's true. That's
you
true.
know?
Yeah. And you
So,
don't know anymore.
no,
Yeah.
not at all.
So, one of the other points, there are three key points that we mentioned in the white papers. One of the things that fundraisers do really well, charitable organizations do really well, is they attract young people. And so in associations, pretty much every single association exec that I've talked to in the last 10 years, maybe now longer than that, my entire career in association management, 20 plus years, right? They're concerned with recruiting young people.
Yep.
20 years ago, those young people were Gen Xers. Today, those young people are millennials. But that is a concern that remains. We want to be able to recruit better among young people. Here's the issue: we tend to set up money as a barrier to membership. Or even to be more precise, we tend to set up paying for membership as a barrier to being a member of our community.
Right.
And
yes.
the thing about young people is they're young, which means they probably don't have a ton of money.
Yeah.
Because they're still paying off student loans, or they're
starting a family.
They're trying to start a family, or buy a house, or buy a car, or whatever. Or they're not that far along in their careers yet. They're not being paid very much.
Yeah.
And so we tend to say, oh well, we'd love to have you, but first you have to pay us. Maybe if we're an especially progressive and forward-thinking association, we might have a young professional rate that's a bit cheaper, right? Fundraising organizations say, you know what, pay us later. Like, we'll worry about the money later. Let's focus right now on establishing a relationship. And that relationship could be around like you do a polar plunge for us, like a one-time kind of thing, like a Special Olympics kind of deal. You do something fun and crazy, and it's a one-time thing, and maybe you actually even use that, although you can't give us money yourself, you use that as an opportunity to raise money from your parents and their friends, and they give the money, and you run into the ocean in when it's January 1st, and it's 20 degrees outside, and it's it's hilarious. Or it might be like you volunteer with us on an ongoing basis. You come into the food bank regularly. You're coming and the Capital Area Food Bank is one of our case studies. Like you come and you give us your time. Even though you can't give us your money and that's cool, we'll worry about that later. Right now, you're giving us your time. Or one of the other things that the food bank does really well is they make it very easy for their younger supporters to be ambassadors on social media.
Yep.
Because, I mean, as we've seen time and time again, young people are they're a media savvy generation. And they tend to have large and active presences on social media platforms that older folks might not be on so much. They're on to whatever is the newest, hippest, greatest thing. They've got, their followers there and whatnot. And you can, even if they can't give you money, they can give you attention that you can't otherwise get. And cause-oriented organizations are very, very good at supplying their young ambassadors with very easy tools to promote the messages of the cause-oriented organization on their social media platforms in a variety of ways. So again, like 5 years from now or 10 years from now, when your financial situation is more settled, you're further along in your career, you're making more money, you've paid off your student loans, you started your family, etc. We can ask you for money then. Right now, we're going to ask you for other kinds of contributions, and we're going to recognize that you are making other kinds of contributions that are equally valuable, right? They're equally valuable to giving us money. So Sonia, do you want to talk a little bit more about what CAFB does?
Yeah, I mean I was going to say, we're using the word fundraising, but there's a reason why the word development is used more. Your fundraising is sort of like the end result. Development is really where you develop the relationship. And yes, this is the organization that Elizabeth mentioned. They have a particularly tough challenge because they provide certifications that are useful for people in an industry throughout their lives. Someone who is just out of school, just out of college, sees, why are they going to do this? It seems so far away. But it's hard to see where certifications are not going to come in handy further down the line because you just haven't gotten there yet. And so the place where they offer value is relationship building and mentorship. And it's sort of just come talk to the people who are farther along, see what they're like, see what your future looks like, because that makes more sense to someone who doesn't have the ability to write a big fat check now, but they're going to maybe want to be a part of this in another way later on in life, and then it's going to serve them well. And that's how you make the case for that.
So this is the CFA Society, Minnesota. They are also one of our case studies. We don't just have case studies of fundraising charitable organizations. We also have some case studies of associations. And, as Sohini mentioned, we're accustomed to, in the association world, to the idea of certification. And so they're chartered financial analysts. They run a certification program. As is common, you cannot get it immediately. You need some experience. So there's the experience requirement and the testing requirement, and then you pass your exams, you've got your experience, you're good to go. So you can't you're not eligible for this straight out of college. And so the approach that they take is, let's build those relationships around the kinds of things that young professionals immediately out of college are looking for. That relationship building, that, let me expand my network. Let me meet some people who are further along in the profession and get a sense of, do I actually want to get on this particular path? Because it's an arduous one. This is an extremely difficult certification to get. Do I really want to commit myself to this? If I do, what are my options? Where might my career go? And so, again, you can't even be a member of, like, a formal member of the association without the certification. But they're saying, yeah, but we need a pipeline, right? To build these relationships with people who aren't even eligible for membership, so that they see us, they know we're here, they see what the possibilities are. And let's concentrate on building the relationship now and worry about the certification and the money and all that kind of thing down the road a little bit.
And one of the things that struck me was it's a transient, it's not transient as a poor word, but this is a group of young people who are going to move. There's a lot more mobility. So if somebody moves from Minnesota to California, how do you continue building that relationship? Why should they continue being in touch with you? And well, it's because the network is what is going to be worth it for them in the beginning, at least. And the network is what is going to help them move along in their career and then make it apparent to them that this is completely worth, being in for the long haul.
I want to say right now, for those of you who are watching, whether on Crowdcast, on Periscope, on Facebook Live, on YouTube Live, I'm seeing your comments over on Facebook, some of your comments there, and they think you're great, you guys. And then Penny said, glad you enjoyed the ASAE event, and that was good too from this morning. So thanks, and keep the comments coming. Let us know if you have questions. This is
Please let us know if you have questions.
Yes, because I think that, as you're going along and you're talking about these things, I just keep thinking about, how can I apply some of these lessons to even what I'm doing? Because I feel like I know we're talking about applying them to associations, but this is really something that we all need to be thinking about, whether we own our own businesses or we're part of a company, a larger company where we're selling. We need to think about what are some of these relationship building, this eye on the pipeline, and how fundraisers are able to do this in a smart way. And so I'm definitely thinking about this and going to continue to think about how to apply it.
Can I speak to that real quick?
Yes,
can I answer that real
please,
quick?
Please.
I think one of the things that we tend to forget is we tend to forget what it was like to be the person getting the mail. Mm-hmm. We tend to forget what it was like to be the person getting that very first, whether it's a letter or an email from an association or from a nonprofit asking you to support the cause. And by the time we get into the belly of the beast, it's a whole pipeline. It's a whole circle of activity. And in the nonprofit world, as I'm sure in the association world as well, we have like a 12 to 18 month plan of what kind of outreach we're going to do. What we have an editorial calendar that goes along with a fundraising calendar so that everything works together and everything shakes hands on the back end. You tend to forget. You stop. What is the expression? You can't see the forest for the trees. Mm-hmm. And I was reminded of this morning because I got an email from some organization that I must have joined about a zillion years ago. Someone clearly hasn't cleaned a list because I had no idea what they were even talking about. It took me a good 2 minutes to go, oh, that's what that used to be about. I'd completely forgotten. Wow. Or the dear friend, dear colleague, dear
don't ever do that.
Space, comma, dear name, space, comma. Like, put yourself in the position of the person who's getting that, because what that says to them is, I have no idea who you people are. I have no idea why I should.
I'm personalizing this. Let's personalize. Well, yeah.
Dear colleague makes the baby Jesus cry.
So I really think that you should put yourself in that position. And that is something that's hard. And I'm here to tell you that the debrief at the end of your acquisition program or a fundraising cycle that went out is there are always drinks required after, I think, or candy or whatever your vice of choice is, because we now live in a place that is there's so many pieces to it, right? Because that's one of the things that we start at the white paper with is fundraising has become a most democratized activity. It used to be you had to be a professional to do it. It used to be that you had to have resources. Anybody can do it now, which means it's that much more crowded. It's that much louder, which means you have to be really that much more on point. Your game has to be absolutely on. So I'm just saying, if you're having a rough day with it, I feel your pain.
Okay, so we've made it through 2 of the key points of the page, 2 of the key findings. What about the third?
The third one is all about campaigns. And this was another thing that really struck me when I was at this other consulting firm, because that was what we did. We did online campaigns and marketing. And, I was used to the association world where we have campaigns, but like a lot of times I'm just thinking about sort of the typical renewal campaign. A lot of times it's, you've got these automated notices that are rolling out of your association management software. And it's a lot of times it's dear colleague, and it looks like this automated email, and all it says is, dear colleague, it's time to renew your dues. Click here, to renew your membership. And, you program 4 of those to go out, 3 months before, 2 months before, a month before, a couple of weeks after, and that's it, right? And that's a campaign. That is not a campaign in the fundraising world, right? I mean, because we did, one of the things I ended up doing a lot of was year-end fundraising campaigns. So you start planning for these things way in advance, and you think about, who are the audiences that we're trying to reach with this campaign? What are the firm goals that we had, like SMART goals, right? They're, specific, measurable. I always forget what they all stand for, but, actionable, results oriented, time bound, right? We're very precise about the goals we're trying to achieve. We talk a lot about who are the audiences we're trying to reach and what do we know about them. We talk through, like, what's the messaging that's going to be persuasive? What's the messaging that's going to be persuasive per audience? Because it's probably different depending on who, young people, old people, small dollar donors, big dollar donors, right? Like you got to segment your messaging for all of that. We think through, what are all the different platforms we can possibly use? Let's look at them all and make sure that this campaign is both multi-channel, so it's using many different platforms, and it's also fully integrated across all those channels, so that as people are getting different messages and different platforms about this campaign, it's clear that they're all tied together through, what they talk about, through the imagery, through what we're promoting, through the ways we talk about the problem that we're trying to solve, and why this particular donor can be the hero in helping us solve that problem. And so it's it's like planning a military campaign. I mean, it's like this very, very well thought out, well planned. Everybody knows what their marching orders are. Everybody knows who's responsible to do what and on what time frame, and when it needs, this notice needs to hit at this time, and it's going to be followed by this, and then we're going to do this, and it's just boom, 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 and then you execute that campaign. And at the end, so he very importantly brought up, you do a debrief. You don't just like finish, oh, renewals are done for the year, let's just move on, right? No, you sit down and talk about what happened. Like, did we actually achieve our goal? Why or why not? What worked? What didn't work? Are there things that we want to do differently next time? You always think, oh, when we go to do the next one, we'll remember. No, you will not remember if you don't write it down
absolutely
now.
Will not.
You will not remember. And so that's why you sit down and you say, what did we learn? Right? Like, what are we gonna keep? What are we gonna do differently? And so that gets you already started on the next cycle.
I feel like that's something that's missing in
so many. My God. Yeah.
And maybe we're afraid, right? Maybe people are afraid to do the debrief.
Well, the thing about debriefs is they're not fun because they always start with, this is what didn't work and this is what we didn't do. But I always look at it as, this is where we made progress. Unless your campaign was a complete and utter bust, there's always some good news to be had. There's always ways to take that information and make the next campaign better. The other thing I want to say is, it's not always just one big campaign. It's lots and lots of small campaigns. I'm sorry if you brought that up, because I had a visitor at the door who was distracting me mildly. But I mean, is now a good time to talk about one of our case studies, New Endeavors, because they did. So New Endeavors by Women is, they started out as a client. They became an organization that's close to my heart because I love what they do. They basically walk with women through various stages of homelessness, from homelessness to housing. And they've been doing this for some 30 years in DC.
Wow.
And you can have the big campaign. There is a big gala. There is a big campaign at the, once a year, but there are also small campaigns. There's the spring campaign. There's a spring challenge. There's a fall challenge, because you have to, yes, it's like the military. Yes, there's a plan. Yes, you have to execute. You also have to pivot. I mean, if your fundraising efforts are largely during traditional fall giving season, well, you reach the end of that dollar cycle by about the summer. The summer is when everybody goes away, nobody gives. Homelessness does not stop in the summer.
Right.
And I've actually been working on issues of housing. I've worked a little bit on it in the past. It would be wrong to say I'm an expert, but I remember writing on the issue many years ago, and I remember interviewing someone who said, and he was an expert in the field, who said, if somebody came down from Mars, they would say that homelessness in the United States starts at Thanksgiving and ends on January 2nd, because that's when we think about it.
Right.
But if you're in the organization, you have to think about it year round. And so we set up a campaign at New Endeavors for Women because we were looking at a crunch, and it was basically set a goal, meet the goal, and we sort of kept on tracking it, tell people this is where we were, and we celebrated. It was a big cause of celebration when people gave whatever it is that they gave, because we had someone who would match a fund. You have to generate excitement, and that's one of the keys to a campaign, because otherwise you're exhausted, the people giving are exhausted. The debrief never happens, because then you're just like, that's it, I'm done, I'm going away. But you need to pace yourself. You need to think about how you're going to continue the day after the campaign is over. People who run events will tell you that, the event does not end when the guests go home.
Right.
The event ends when you finally lock the door, and then the next day you write down the debrief.
Yeah.
And I think that is really important to think about. Is it's fundraising is not a line, it's a continuum.
Yeah.
And that's really important to keep in mind. And you have to be good to yourself, because especially if you're in a cause-oriented organization, it's hard to see sometimes what the cause is. It's hard to see that, the thing that they do with a thermometer that keeps filling up so that you finally get to your goal.
Yeah.
That can be really depressing. That's when you find a buddy.
It makes me feel like that Parks and Rec, how they were trying to raise up forever.
Yeah.
Sorry. I know there's so many different TV shows. It's ridiculous to even try, but.
Well, although actually that's a really good point. So we have kind of at the very end of the white paper, we have a final bonus tip, which is from Beth Cantor, which, a number of people might be familiar with.
I love Beth
her.
Cantor.
She's really, really well known in the fundraising and development world, a little bit less so in associations. But she graciously allowed us to do sort of a little excerpt from a book that she's brought out about as fundraising and development professionals dealing with burnout. And self-care. And so that was our final tip is, membership professionals and association executives can burn out too. And if just like we say, we're mission-driven organizations, but no money, no mission, right?
Right.
Well, also, if you have no staff resources, you have no mission. And if you run yourself into the ground, you have no staff resources. So, it is really important to make sure that you aren't burning yourself out. And Beth has some very, very fun and very concrete tips about how to do that.
So let me interrupt for a second and say, just because I know I can't believe that the hour goes so quickly, but I want to know, and I saw, Elizabeth, that you responded to this question, but I wanted to give you both a chance to respond to it. Hassana had requested some information about, she said, do any of you use a system that makes it easy to donate online or text? And said text to give is a gold standard, but there are other options. And so she shared some information about that. I don't know if Sony, if you have any recommendations, but I just wanted to say that out loud, just because this is an audio podcast later. And so I want everybody to kind of benefit from some of the questions that are asked.
I think, I started to type an answer back to that and then thought I'll let you take the lead on that because this is your show. And my answer is it really depends. How large is your organization? What is your goal? What is your budget? All of those things. I will just say, fish where the fish are. Make it easy for your people to give. Make it whatever it is that you choose should be one click for the person at the other end. Never make people work to give you their money. By the time somebody wants to be part of your organization, it should be easy, however it is that they want to participate or give at whatever level they want to give.
Right.
Nothing annoys me more than, 14 clicks before I can finally be done. That's just, there are lots of opportunities out there. So that's a total non-answer. But I mean, there's lots of platforms out there. I would say this is part of the debrief, or rather the pre-brief. Whatever it is that you do, test it a lot. Test it out a lot. Test it in-house. Get your friends to test it. Get their friends who don't know you at all to test it, because that's how you'll get an honest answer of, no, that looked like an error.
Yeah.
You're not going to.
Or that was way too hard.
That was way too hard. But mostly it's things like, really? I thought that was a typo. I mean, because you get so used to seeing your platform, you get so used to seeing all the pages. It's self-explanatory to you. It is not explanatory to the people on the outside. Whatever it is that you pick, that should be one of the things that you do, and make it easy.
Yeah, that's actually something I really wanted to emphasize. So when it comes to online donations, if you're already doing online transactions with your association management software, it can probably take donations too. I mean, that's really just another. I just realized there's like light shining on my face. Oh well,
it's pretty. It's like a rainbow.
So
it's nice.
that's that is basically just selling an additional product. However, many association management packages make doing online transactions extremely difficult. So if you think about like your own experience if you go to donate to an organization and go online, the best organizations, this is definitely a good practice in the fundraising world. Right there on the front of their website, really obvious, this is where you go to donate. Like there's a big button that just reads donate. And when you click on it, they only ask you for the minimum amount of information they need, which is how much do you want to give us? What's your name? What's your credit card number? And probably like what's your zip code?
Right.
And they might still do stuff about, is this gift in honor of someone? Does your employer do matching? All that, but that's after, right? First is how much money do you want to give us, and let us get your credit card number. Look at your own association's online practices and processes with that in mind. And I suspect that you will find that it is not as easy.
It used to be my old trick whenever I wanted good customer service with anything, whether it was like a cable or whatever. I used to just go directly to the sales people, because I could never get through customer service. But if I went through sales, I could cut in the line. I just wanted to mention, Hassana has a follow-up question about, what about gamification? Is that good with donations too?
I think that depends on your audience. And I'm going to say that a lot. I think it really depends. First of all, do you have an audience for whom gamification is a word? If they don't know what that is, if that's not how they do things, I don't know that that's going to make a difference. And I think that this is one of those places where I caution people to not get swayed by the latest shiny object syndrome. Everybody has this. We should have it too. Not if it doesn't work for your audience.
Right.
I remember when everybody jumped on Twitter because that's where it was at. There's a great number of major donors, older major donors in many organizations that I've been involved with, who just never got on. They were just like, it's not my thing. Just talk to me just talk to me. I really think that it depends on anytime a question like that comes up. Should we text? Not if your audience does not text. And I have had to do that research, and I have had to say that to clients. First of all, I have said, How many of your clients actually even do things on their phone other than, I mean, it's changed now, but I remember 5 or 6 years ago, somebody wanted to text to give. I'm like, really? Who's your audience? They were 60 plus at the time. And I was like, these are not people who want to be bothered with texting unless it's an emergency. That's how they think about it. So always think about, and the other thing I will also say is, yes, lots of nonprofits will have big, large donate here. It's a different color, something to sort of track you towards that action. Once you get there, don't give people too many choices. You know, you want to give people the world. You don't want to give them that many choices because you don't want to slow down the process between them wanting to take an action and them wanting to just be done with the transaction. It's not just put yourself in the position. How many windows do you want to go through before you just buy that book on Amazon or whatever the case might be?
I tell you, not many.
And also, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. Yeah. And so give people choices of how much to give. That's a small little tip I would say. Instead of, would you like to give today? Blank. Go with 10, 20, whatever your tiers are. And, give people those options. 9 times out of 10, they're going to give you more than you maybe expected, or, it's, you give them the choice to.
Yeah, you get more than the woman I referenced earlier, who was a fundraiser, always said, you don't get if you don't ask. And I've heard that several times since then, but she was the first person who said it that I remember. It resonated, and I held on to it. And I think about that,
So one of the other things that I would say with regards to this whole idea of like, is text to give right for us? Isn't gamification right for us, etc. Is so how do you know? If it's something that you haven't tried before, how do you know if this is going to appeal to your audience or not? Set up a small scale test. So this gets to the lean startup white paper, right? But figure out the smallest possible investment of resources test that you can set up and do that and see what happens. So the favorite example that I love to give about this is 20 plus years ago when I started my first association job with the American Political Science Association. We, people like were just starting to have websites, and ours was broke. And so we had this idea that maybe our members would like to be able to join or renew online. Well, at the time, hiring somebody to program a real join online process was not going to be a simple, easy, inexpensive thing because this didn't exist. And so I thought, okay, well, wait, I can put together just a form on our website that's going to dump people's information, yes, including their unblinded credit card numbers at the time, into an email that will then go to our membership staff, and they'll like print it out or copy and paste, straight into our normal way of processing things. And so it'll look like they're joining online. They're not actually joining online. We're still processing this the way we always do.
That is such a lean startup answer. I love that, where you made it look good on the front end.
On the front end, and on the back end, we were totally processing it by hand, exactly the way we always did, right? And so we did this. Like we're like, sure, why not? Let's see what happens. Nobody's really sniffing for credit cards yet, so it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, GDPR experts everywhere are like, oh, I can't.
Yeah, this is 20 years ago. Nobody's even looking for this stuff, right? And so we did it, and sure enough, it did turn out that our members really wanted to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, it's worth paying the money to do this right. And within a couple of years, we were doing $1.5 million in online business every year.
Look at that.
Now, one of our sister associations, another scholarly society, their members were a little bit less technologically savvy, and they tried the same test, and their members didn't want to do it. So they didn't spend the money, right?
Yeah.
Find a small scale way to test it before you jump fully into whatever your groovy idea is.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's those are such wise words, and actually wise words to end with, even though I don't want to. It's 2:59, so we're nearing the end of the hour, but I just wanted to thank you guys so much for coming on and for talking about this. Everyone, if you're not on Crowdcast right now, where you got the link to the white paper that we're talking about during today's chat, I will post the Facebook Live. I will post it in YouTube Live, and I will post it over on Twitter in about 3 minutes. So look for the hashtag Allison Chat. It's not a hashtag that's easy to forget. And then you'll be able to get that information. But I want to thank you guys so much for coming on to the show today, for talking about your white paper and talking about these things that we can learn from fundraising and fundraisers. And so I hope you really enjoyed the show, everyone. If you like the show, please be sure to join the private Facebook group for Association Chat, and come back next week when we talk with the author Ryan Williams about the influencer economy. And everybody's interested in either influencer marketing or becoming an influencer. We're going to talk about all of that and more. So please come back next week. And until next time, everyone, keep asking questions to learn every day. As Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. So thank you for joining us, everyone. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.